Thank you for joining me in another episode of The Art of Comic Writing. I am your host, Jorge Medina. That's George with a J. And before we get to it, I want to wish you all a happy Halloween. It is Halloween this year. We are airing the show on October 31st. I know I'm wearing white, should be wearing black, but it is Halloween. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And the guest that I'm going to have on the show today is a big fan of Halloween because his birthday is near the season of Halloween or the holiday of Halloween. And so he's going to be talking to us today. But before we get to that, I'm going to ask you guys to do me a favor and subscribe, like, and even more importantly, share this video out to anyone who has ever attempted to write a book, a comic, a poem. We're going to be talking to a lot of writers, and we have done so in the past few weeks already. And they're going to be giving us tips on the do's and don'ts, things that they've done to help them with their writing, things that they've done that's made their writing maybe even worse, how to make things better, tips like that. So if you know someone who wants to be a writer, is a writer, has no idea how to get into writing, but wants to do so, share this video out to them and let them know that the show is here. Don't forget to also hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of these informative, and I like to think they're informative shows. All right. Right now, however, next up is a word from our sponsor. And today's show is sponsored by our friends at Gig. Do you have the next best-selling comic book idea, but have no idea how to get started because you're an artist and not a writer, or vice versa? Then go to globalindiegroup.com and find exactly what you're looking for. Gig has a list of writers, artists, editors, colorists, letterers, even podcasts on the platform to help you bring that comic book to life. Sign up today to get started and make sure you provide the promo code WRITING at checkout. What are you waiting for? Go to globalindiegroup.com today and get started on the next best-selling comic book you've been wanting to create. Typos. Man, the dreaded telltale sign that you're reading an indie book, right? At least it was for many years. Now, us as indies have gotten much better about how much quality control goes into our books. And one of those quality checks is incorporating and hiring an editor for the production of our comics. It took us a while to figure that out, I think. You know, it took us a little bit of a while. But to be fair, a lot of you found the use of an editor a lot earlier than I did because, you know, I'm hiring my first editor for one of my books now. So that's definitely for sure. My guest this week is not only an incredible artist and writer, of course, but he's also an editor. He's saving us from typos, one word at a time, kids. And we're not only going to be talking to him about the job of an editor, but we're also going to be talking about how much control is he and other indies willing to give up to the person reading their drafts. Plus, we're going to be giving him a writing prompt as a parting gift, like I like to do on the show. Okay, and without further ado, please welcome a person who I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite some time. He is the owner of the indie publishing house Dark Fire Press. He's the creator of the indie book Chariana. Plus, he has other incredible stories. He's a writer, an artist, and like I mentioned earlier, he's an editor and just an amazing guy. Let's say hello to J.M. DeSantis.
Hey, how's it going, George? Yeah.
What's going on, JM? How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. A little tired, you know. Been doing a lot of shows.
Well, okay, so for those watching, you guys know the format of the show. I am going to be asking JM some questions about writing. We do have a topic that we will tackle towards the end of the show. And then at the very end, I have a surprise writing prompt for JM that he's going to take with him as homework. And for those watching, you guys can also be a part of it if you want to. But let's get going here. Let's get going here, JM. So,
All right.
I know that you are not just a writer, you're also an artist, which
Yes.
writist is what you call yourself.
Right.
But more specifically, when it comes to your writing, okay, how many drafts do you go through before you are happy with what you've got?
Okay, so this is going to sound so mathematical, but I do try to get it by the third draft.
Ah,
And I only say that now because before I couldn't give you a number. Sometimes it was 2, sometimes it was like 7, right?
oh wow.
But ever since, and we have spoken about it before in the past, but just bringing up, I read John Truby's The Anatomy of
Yes,
Story.
yes.
And when I got through that, and that's going back, what, 7, 8 years ago now, I read it. I wish I had known about it when it first came out, because it like changed everything, right? Like I had always tried to, work with synopsises or just write straight through from like an idea to an ending I had in mind. But that book made planning much easier for me, which well, plotting, like I work better with that.
Yeah, I agree. I do too.
It keeps me focused because I don't have ADD, but I can get a little bit like that if you give me like nothing, right? Like
Yeah.
if anybody's seen me in interviews, how like I just like circle around the conversation. So yeah, like I need a little bit of structure. I can deviate from the structure, but the nice thing about the plot, getting to how many drafts, right? Oh, hi, Sorella, how we doing? Of course, she always has to make an appearance when I'm on a show. So yeah, doing the plotting and planning out the story and putting my scenes in order and everything, it cuts down on how much editing I have to do,
Right.
which is great. I like editing. I think it's the nice magic about writing. Like, I can get hyper focused in it too. I can edit for hours.
Yeah.
But if I have a finished book and I have to start changing the story structure and everything, it is a monumental task that I probably will put off forever if I don't like if the plot's already in place,
Yeah.
then it's just like I'm fixing little things. Like I don't have to rewrite, 100 pages. I would rather do it in the plotting part. So I try to get it done in 3 drafts, but that is after plotting it out. Right.
So your first draft is right after plotting it out. Your first draft, is it just like, okay, I'm just basically just gonna throw up on this piece of paper and just put ideas down, and then the second draft is you start
Yeah, I mean,
fixing that. Is that how that works, or what are your 3 drafts? What do they look like?
okay, so yeah, first draft I get everything out, and it can be bad too. Like I sometimes have a tendency when I write to repeat myself. Like I'll write I'll write things from like I'll word it in like 6 different ways. And I don't always realize I'm doing it. Sometimes I'm conscious of it, but it's like I just don't know how I want to say this thing I'm trying to say. So I just whatever in my head starts coming out. Good dialogue, bad dialogue. At least I have a flow for how everything is going to go. So the outline helps with that. But I just put it all out. And sometimes, especially because I tend to write a lot of period pieces, if you want to call it that, I'll use a modern word just because I can't think of what I'm supposed to be using in that moment, right? Fine, whatever. That's the first draft. It's not necessarily junk, but it's not perfect, right?
Right.
And then what I'll do in the second draft is I start, that's when I'm paying attention to pacing. So I'm trying to make sure, the parts I want to go like quick, they're working out that way. It's not slowing the reader down too much in certain areas. And then, for the other things, I'm checking pacing, even for the longer stuff, because, occasionally you have a area that moves too quick, but you're like, I don't want to jump to this other scene so fast. Like I want to give the reader a little time to relax. And sometimes, it's a weird trick, but sometimes if I really don't know how to get from point A to point B, I just like cut a scene at a good spot where it's a little cliffhangery. And this is for comics or prose. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's usually second draft. Second draft, I start doing pacing and I fix up any inconsistencies. Then I'm usually after that going for like grammar and everything. That's the third draft.
That's the third draft. No, it's interesting because, like, the thing about drafts is like a lot of people sometimes think, "Oh, I wrote it, I'm done with it." No, that's just your first draft. That's
Oh
nothing.
yeah,
You just finished it. That's a good job. You finished it. But now it's when
right.
the real writing starts. Is once that first draft is done, and the fact that you've been able to narrow it down like this, that's kind of cool, man. Because I think people
Yeah.
struggle with that.
Well, sometimes I go into a fourth draft. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not that it never happens. Sometimes even with plotting something well, there's just certain things that aren't working, and I really need a fourth draft to do it. Have I done a fifth since I got better at plotting? I don't know, but
yeah,
then technically, I consider the outline and everything a first draft because
right.
I write out all the major actions and then I literally will do like a scene for scene, especially with comics. What winds up happening is I write out all the major stuff, you know, in order, after I do some background writing and stuff like that. And then for the comics, to make sure the pacing all works, I actually write bullet points,
Hmm.
page one. This is what happens on page one. So I'm almost like doing a Marvel version
Right.
of the script
Yeah.
before I go on to a full script where I do panel for panel.
Gotcha.
You
Gotcha.
know?
And now at what point, and I guess, I mean, you go, you go through your drafts and stuff like that. At what
Right.
point do you let someone else read it, or do you ever let anyone else
Okay,
read it?
so yeah, no, this happens one of two ways.
Okay.
Either I have gone through it enough times that I feel like it's clean enough, right? Not perfect, but at least I've worked out any of the story bugs, right? Even if the grammar's not perfect, I can have somebody else like look at it and just double check. But the other way it happens is the complete opposite.
Hmm.
If a story like what is happening with my recent novel that I finished and I'm having edited right now, if a story is giving me too much trouble and I really don't know where to fix it, because the later middle section of that novel in particular, like I had outlined it and I wrote it from one character's perspective, and I was just like, this something is just not working. Like, even though my outline was planned out well, I need to fix this and I don't know how to.
Yeah.
So I'll hand it over to somebody else to be like, look, what do you think?
Hmm.
Like, I don't tell them, look, I'm looking for specific feedback or this character's not working. I just give it to them and like want to see what their reaction is. And usually I've found sometimes there's stuff that, um, you know, uh, I knew was going to be a problem. And it's like, okay, good. Like I saw that right. Sometimes you get some surprises on stuff that people were confused about, and you're like, oh, well, when you read it back through it, you're like, oh, okay, I get why that would be, like you
Yeah.
start looking at that. And then the third thing is every once in a while, it's just like, no, I understood all that. And it's like, oh, okay. Because I really thought I was messing it up. Like I thought
But
that
that's a
was
nice
really
surprise,
bad.
though. It's a nice surprise
Yeah,
when somebody says that.
right. Yeah, it can happen, right? Sure. And I think part of that is because I've gotten better. I
Yeah.
think when I was younger, I was well, I funny you talk about like the one draft thing. When I was less experienced, I was like I loved like the raw writing before it got like played with.
Right.
So I almost like didn't want to over edit, which is when I probably needed the most editing, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I was very self-conscious because, it's funny like how um having a book published and a children's book and doing some more writing, like now people are taking me seriously as a writer. But when I was first starting, everybody knew me as an artist and would be like, I know you want to do this writing thing, JM, but you know, uh, so yeah, I was always more self-conscious, and to some degree, like even though I love doing art, like writing's more personal. Like I guess it comes from a deeper place. So like there's a certain I don't know. I guess I used to be more self-conscious about it because I felt like it was what's the word? Yeah, I get not more vulnerable, but like something like that. Like I was letting out a little bit more of my soul with that one.
Right,
But it
right.
was,
No, man.
yeah.
So when you have something like this, where you have that kind of mindset where it's like, damn, this is kind of personal to me. Is feedback difficult to take as a writer for you? Like whether it's positive or
Uh,
negative,
right. So I'll tell you something, and this is I don't want to open a whole can of worms with this, but when I was with Rosarium, I wasn't getting a lot of feedback from the head of it, and I really wanted feedback at that time because I wanted Chadiana to really be good.
Right.
And I remember every time I got a bad review, oh man, it was rough,
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that's something that happens when you're younger and less experienced. I mean, I don't want to be flippant about it, but if somebody really doesn't like what I'm doing, I don't care. Whatever. I'll go find somebody that does. And that
Right.
doesn't mean like somebody has to be a yes man. It's just like, I can totally take the criticism. It's just like, I don't think there's much value, and I think it's a thing nowadays, right? But it's well, as long as the internet's existed, right? Sorry for anybody that's like spamming the comment section right now, but like, I don't know, like I just don't find much value in somebody just, and you can bleep this out, but just like shitting all over my work. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm not really getting any constructive feedback
Right.
on this, right?
True. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I've had other people make some critiques or criticism where I was like, yeah, okay, that I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never want to be in a spot where I can't take criticism and that it's not offered. Because I think like,
Mm.
I don't know, I have that, I guess that Abraham Lincoln thing where it's like if things are going too well, I expect like something bad's about to happen. So it's almost like
Okay.
if I'm not getting criticized a little bit, it feels like
When's the next shoe gonna drop,
somebody's
right?
not telling me the truth, or yeah, something really bad is about to happen.
I got you.
Right?
I got you. So,
Yeah.
okay. So feedback is one thing. Now, do you then use an official editor? Like, do you use editors for your stuff?
I do use editors, but I would say it's a little bit unorthodox. So with Robert Phillips, because I was trying to get it out quick, and it was an older, but that's my novella, because I'm just throwing the name out there, and nobody watching this may know. But yeah, my novella that I put out in 2019, which I wrote back in 2008, like that's how long it was sitting on the shelf. Because like again, wrote it all out from start to finish with a bare bones outline, and the first half of the book needed so much work structurally that's why it sat for like 10 years while I did other things, because that's too much of a headache. I re-outlined it right before I rewrote it, and that helped bring it together. But anyway, with that one, I just used beta readers,
Okay.
And I let them pretty much give me the feedback and tell me where things were working or not working, which I guess it was pretty good. I don't want to say, I don't think it's a perfect novel, but I get good feedback on it,
Yeah.
so I
No,
can.
I enjoyed it, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, and I get that from a lot of people. They're like, oh, it's really, really well written. So either I was just like in some kind of super focused frenzy when I was putting it together, or I just like lucked out, because I remember there wasn't too much feedback on too many things. I very recently though did find a typo in it. I'm so mad about it. I won't tell you where it is, but if you found it, there. I just happened to open it up one day, and I was just like looking at like the layout and everything. Not that I like go through like reading a lot of my stuff, but I was just skimming a spot, and I was like, oh, this is the passage that was read at some author event I did last year. And I was like, I used the wrong spelling for a word, and I was like, and I saw it, and I was like, no. Oh no.
That's the worst feeling, dude. That is the worst
It
feeling.
is, but I try to take some solace in the fact that it happens everywhere. I have read so many
It
books
does.
that, I mean, you want to try not to do it, right? But it slips through. It does.
It
I
does.
think I think I've heard like, and I don't know that this is factually true, but that the Bible might be the only book that doesn't have any typos in it.
Wow,
You know?
interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right, so
If that's true. If that's true. I haven't read it.
yeah, true. I haven't read it from cover to cover.
Right.
So here's the topic of the day, so to speak.
Oh,
Right.
right.
So we talked about editing, and you mentioned beta readers. Now, for those readers or those writers watching, how much control, if you do have an editor, if you and I think you probably should, because you're not going to catch your own mistakes a lot of the time.
Right. And it's just let me put it this way, guys. This will go into my answer too, right?
Yeah.
So, but let me just put it real quick, and then I'll ask me and I'll answer the question and everything. But it's good practice again, because you will miss things, right? And look, I had 3 beta readers, all of them well-read people. One of them was a writer themselves. The other one, well, the 2 of them writers, right? One was more nonfiction, the other one was more fiction stuff, and he's a screenplay writer too. My friend KL Young, that does a lot of Lovecraftian stuff, so he's like a good one to choose for a Lovecraftian novella. But all 3 people read it and missed something, right? So, because I just caught it now, and I'm not upset. I mean, it's human,
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes in your head you're thinking that something sounds good, but then on the other end it's like nobody knows what you're talking about, and it's just a little bit of tweaking. It's not even like, oh, you're just like you're incompetent as a writer. It's just like, no, like sometimes, like, we want to write like we talk, but
True.
it doesn't work the same way. Like you really need to ground people a little bit more. And the other thing is too, yeah, you just miss things.
Yeah.
Sometimes a word gets left out. Sometimes a letter gets left out.
Right.
That happened with my children's book. There was one H out of a there. Yeah. And that one too had an editor, because it was originally with another publisher. It was looked over and everything, and yeah.
Human error. So how much control should you give your editor then?
So I guess it depends, right? I personally have always heard the wisdom. It's the way I am as an editor, and luckily enough, I've seen just from what she's doing, that the editor we have at Darkfire Press working on the horror anthology we're putting together is the same way. The advice I was always given is, don't get an editor that's gonna, you want an editor that's gonna tell you when things aren't working, right? But not how to fix them, I mean, of course, if you're asking for that sort of feedback, like, what do you think I can do, right? But an editor should never be trying to change the tone of your writing, or getting too much into, well, like the old Hollywood producer stories. It's like, well, if I'm producing this movie, I want this to end with a big explosion at the end, so you can change the ending. And it's like, an editor shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff, and they should be understanding kind of where you're coming from. With me and Phil, when I was editing his book, it was a conversation. I gave him certainly some pointers, and I would give him reasons why I felt something would work. But at the end of the day, I felt like it was up to him. There was no like ego in it. I was just trying to I wanted his book to be the best book that he could do. I think that's your job as an editor, and you want an editor that's going to do that. And it's tricky, right? Because, like, of course, we always want to give people work and stuff, but Phil's book is very religious. I happen to grow up Catholic, so I had some knowledge base. But like, if say a Muslim writer was writing about that experience, I don't know enough, right, to be able to like be an editor on that. So you want somebody that's appropriate for the subject matter, right? Like if you're writing a romance novel and you hire an editor that just really has no idea about like romance stories, like, not saying that you can't give people chances with things, and sometimes having a different person's perspective is good, but I'm just trying to think of a good example, right? Like, historical fiction, right? If you're writing that kind of stuff, you would want an editor that also knew the period that you were writing about, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're writing about the Old West and you're doing your due diligence and doing your research, which you should as a writer, right?
Mhm.
Don't make that the whole thing. You want an editor that knows as much, if not more, than you do about it, so that they're not editing out things that really should be there,
Right.
or vice versa, not catching things that need to be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, no, an editor should never be. An editor's job really should be trying to get the book to be the best it can be. Now, I know that that's what I've been told, and I've been lucky enough to mostly work with people like that are pretty hands off. They just want to help it be the best it can be. But I've read and heard stories about people that when you go to a bigger publisher, they're going to have more control over it, and they're going to ask for, if not demand, changes. I mean, I can't speak to it, because I'm getting the story like third hand from somebody that knew a bigger name writer that was with a major publisher, and there's been some films made of his books too. But from what I understand, he would get annoyed sometimes because sometimes they'd be asking him to change things, and he's like, I've been on the New York Times bestseller list how many times? Like, I know what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, it can get annoying if you're butting heads with the editor about stuff. I'm not sure if that answers the question right, but
No,
yeah.
I think it does. I mean, I think that it depends. It depends on who you're working with, right? Because, like you said, if it's a major publisher who is used to selling millions of books and they're telling you to change something, you may look at that and say, "Wow, these guys have sold a lot of books. Maybe I should change it." Versus, a publishing or maybe just an editor who maybe hasn't sold as much as telling you to change something that you really feel like, "No, I did my research. This is right. Like, I'm not gonna necessarily change that because I know that it's right."
And the thing is, of course, like here I am, right? I'm not working for Penguin. I'm not making 6 or 7 figures as an editor, right? So like, who am I to be talking? But yeah, you don't want somebody that's just going to start changing everything in your book. Of course, if you're a new writer and there's a lot of things in there that really need to be fixed, that's a totally different story. Usually it comes down to pacing issues or clarity or things like that, or just stuff that just doesn't, like, maybe it sounded good in theory, but in practice it's not really working, right? But that's a little bit different. And I think, just like anything else, I truly believe that, look, you were talking about this when we were backstage a little bit, but you're like a film buff. So am I. I truly believe that even the worst movie out there, if it was like re-edited and like the person had somebody like helping them, it could be turned into a good story. I have this whatchamacallit, this kind of like side fantasy of like taking some really bad, poorly made movies and like trying to like mine them for like turning them into a good story, like rewriting them or whatever.
Right. But no, and it's interesting because you're right. There's so much left on the cutting room floor on movies. You're right. If it was, and editing is so important, especially in movies, because it's the reason why you have director's cut, right? Because it's like, let me show you what it was supposed to be, and then this is what it turned out.
Yeah. And there are times, I remember this as far back as college when, I mean, now I'm going to age myself, but like, you get a DVD and the DVD would have all the cut content and stuff like that. And sometimes you look at those scenes and you'd be like, why the hell did they take that out? That just made like 20 minutes of the movie make more sense because this little like 30-second scene. Like, what the hell did they do? And I feel like movies are a good example of that, how like too many cooks in the kitchen can really like mess something up. I'm just gonna like blacklist myself with this, but then right? But then there are other times, right? I'm sure, right? So giving people some credit in the comic book industry and stuff like that. Yeah, if you're working on something for Marvel or DC, these are established characters. So yeah, the editors are probably going to have a lot more say in what you're doing
Yeah.
because they have to make sure everything flows with the canon story. That's a little bit different. But then you're kind of doing work for hire stuff. It's not like your own. Um, it's not your own story. You're not. You're being brought in to write something for them rather than your own thing.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give anybody bad advice too. Like really, like definitely get an editor and get an editor that'll tell you when stuff isn't wrong. Just don't get an editor that says, "Well, I know how to write this better," right?
That should be a red flag, right?
Yeah, right. Your character should be this instead of that. I think it should be taking place in this area rather than that area. When they start wanting to give you very specific feedback like that, then they're changing your story, and that's probably not an editor you want to work with.
Good point.
And you know what? That editor probably can write, and they should probably take that idea because it's going to be so changed from the idea you have and go write their own story and just forget about trying to change yours.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Excellent advice, man. I do have one final question for you.
Right.
And this is the bonus question. So, what is your favorite YouTube channel and why is it Get Your Meds?
I'm sorry, because we're recording this pre-launch, so it's like I don't know any of the content other than this right now. But it's get your meds because Jorge Medina is a great guy and he's see even Cyril is happy. And he's a great writer, great friend of mine. And I mean, if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel.
That's
If
what I'm talking
the bell notification is still a thing, hit the bell so you get all the notifications.
Yes.
And like this video.
That's exactly right. Like this video. Like it a lot. But okay, so now we're to the fun part, right? And not that this hasn't been fun. This has been a blast. But this is the surprise writing prompt for JM and for everybody watching. If you want to get down with this, the writing prompt for tonight, being that it is Halloween.
Right. That's right. Happy Halloween.
That's right. Happy Halloween. All right. So the prompt is: a black cat is crossing an empty street. So that is the prompt. You can take, after the show, obviously after the show's done, take your 15 minutes, write down something. And the prompt is: a black cat is crossing an empty street. It can be in the form of a short story, whatever you want. You can draw it, whatever you want. It's whatever you want to do. But JM, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I appreciate your insight. It's been very informative.
Yeah. Again, happy Halloween, everyone.
I'll talk to you soon, JM. It is always a blast to talk to JM DeSantis, very, very good indie friend of mine. Please make sure that you go to his website, darkfirepress.com. Pick up the books that he's got on there. The Adventures of Wonder Dog is one of them. So make sure you do that. And if you enjoyed the conversation, tell me what you thought about editing. And do you have an editor? Have you used an editor? Are you using an editor? Are you planning on doing so? Write it down. Comments below. Do all that stuff. Let me know what you got going on. Don't forget the writing prompt. The writing prompt: a black cat is crossing an empty street. If you guys want to get down with that prompt, make sure you do so. My email will be in the show notes as well. If you want to email me your short 15-minute writing that you did based on that prompt, send it over and I will post it on the website if you allow it. If not, then I won't. That's just how we roll. All right. Well, that was another great show. Again, happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, I am very excited because I will have L.A. Cunningham on the show. She will be talking to us about writing. Make sure you tune in next week. In the meantime, guys, don't forget, keep writing. Peace.